Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 97 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Joe Meade is with me today, and we are doing a preview for the Big East Tournament. Now, it has actually gotten underway, so we'll recap a couple of those games that happened today. But, Joe, down year in the Big East, we have St. John's winning it. We have Creighton, UConn, and Marquette solidly in the tournament. We have Xavier on the bubble. No tournament teams in action today, but what are your overarching thoughts going into a Big East tournament like this?
Yeah, Sean, I think there's a lot of storylines to consider. The storyline, I think, of college basketball, at least the way we grew up, was St. John's, just the absolute revival from Rick Pitino. We could get into that for an entire podcast episode if we wanted to, but it's really hard to see how they're not one of the overwhelming favorites. Obviously, every year it's at the Garden, but I think with the energy and resurgence of their fan base, they'll have a heavy presence. And they're kind of like, in a way, they're pretty similar to Michigan State. They're pretty deep, really good guard play, and they don't have to make shots to beat you. That's probably the most scary thing about this team. I think a lot of 2 or 3 seeds in this tournament they're heavily reliant on making shots. St. John's is not, and that's something we've seen all year in the Big East, and I don't think it's necessarily going to change in the Big East tournament. You got Creighton, who's always a dangerous team come March, a team that when they make shots, I don't think anyone in the country is necessarily able to beat them to a heavy extent. And then UConn and Dan Hurley, the defending champion of the Big East tournament and the defending back-to-back national champion. And I think they're playing really good basketball right now too. So I think you could make a case for all three of those top seeds. But Sean, what are your thoughts? I think you and Mike's pick were pretty surprising.
Yeah, so if you check the Instagram earlier today, Joe went with Mr. March himself, Dan Hurley, to win the Big East tournament. Mike and I both went with Villanova. We did not actually talk before these picks were made, so I just think this is the tournament that could have something up its sleeve. We have, a St. John's team that's played a lot. It is at their home arena, even though it is considered neutral for bracketology purposes. Actually, these games. Then we have a Marquette UConn on the 8 line. Marquette is actually falling a lot. We have Creighton on the 9, and then we have Xavier, who really could use this win against Marquette. We have them in the field now, and losing this game wouldn't kill them, but they have just one quad one win. And then if you check out the In a Nutshell podcast, Ohio State lost today, so that spot is probably up for grabs. So Xavier does have one spot room for error, but that's the early storyline I'm looking for, Joe, is can Xavier get over the hump here and punch their ticket? And how about Xavier in the first 4? I don't remember off the top of my head an Ohio team being in the first 4. That would be great for the crowd. That would be great for ratings. And Xavier's certainly a team that's playing strong coming into the tournament rather than falling like Marquette. So that's the 2:30 game tomorrow, and we expect St. John's to take care of Butler, who beat Providence today. But, Joe, that's a triple circle game for me. Marquette could keep falling, and Xavier could essentially punch their ticket.
Yeah, sorry, I just lost.
Did we lose you there?
How about now?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I think Xavier, Sean, they've been playing their best basketball ever since the months turned. Ever since that loss to Villanova, and not really a bad loss if you consider it. They've Yeah, I believe they're on a 7-game win streak coming into this tournament, and 2 of those games were particularly impressive. The first one being last Saturday at home against Creighton. From start to finish, they just dominated them. Conwell, big shots. It felt like Kalkbrenner and Ashworth were doing nothing all day. 3 of 12 from Ashworth. Though Kalkbrenner got his 10 of 18, they were largely nullified by Zach Freemantle, Ryan Conwell. This is kind of what you wanted to see out of Xavier the whole year. Just 2 of those guys who are, I think, stars in their own right. And we saw that part of the very first half of the season, but now seeing it in full effect. I think Sean Miller, let's face it, Sean, he underperformed at Arizona, but this is a guy who come March, he's been in enough of these where he has to know what it takes, right? He knows his rotation's solid. He knows he probably only has three guys off the bench, but if Maddox Jr. or a Hughley could give good minutes off the bench, I think this is a team that could easily solidify 1 or 2 wins in this tournament, perhaps find itself playing on Saturday night.
And Joe, while you were talking there, I was actually looking at the team sheet, and they seem to have acquired another quad one win, which they did not. They got that by not playing, so they are likely to get. They could probably jump San Diego State with this with a win against Marquette tomorrow. If they get a crack at St. John's, they've played them well. And I agree with the Sean Miller stuff. He has a very old team that's been there before they made it to the Sweet 16 a couple of years ago. You've got Ryan Conwell, who's come from Indiana State. Marcus Foster from Furman, who he's played in the tournament. He's won a game. You have Dante Maddox, who is from Toledo, I believe. Yep, he's played high-profile games too. So, this team might not have a lot of Big East experience, but they certainly have postseason experience. And for how poorly Marquette is playing without much bench, I think Xavier is probably going to win that game tomorrow. And then when we head into the bottom half of the bracket, Joe, this is one where we could potentially see a little bit of chaos. DePaul has already beaten Georgetown. The Hoyas, a pretty solid second season under Ed Cooley, but they lose Thomas Sorber for the season a couple weeks ago, and they've now dropped 2 games to DePaul this year. DePaul, Creighton, Seton Hall, Villanova tonight. But one of these teams is going to get either a crack at St. John's in the championship game or somebody else. So I think we could see a little bit more volatility here with Creighton and UConn pretty solidly in the tournament. Maybe they both don't really have very deep benches, so maybe they do, keep their starters to 34, 35 minutes. But Marquette Xavier, a huge game, and then whoever wins that against St. John's on Friday night in Game 1 will be cool. But I think we could see a little bit of chaos down in the bottom half.
To an extent, I agree, Shad, just because of the way Creighton plays. I think, to be honest with you, Shad, I think Creighton is the team that's ruined a lot of brackets over the years. People either under or overestimating them. Pardon me, Shad. The storyline I'm looking at is the ex like major coaches, and Dan Mata, Sean Miller, of course, is included, and Chris Holtman. Can one of them completely flip this tournament on its head? I think it's plausible. It's worth discussing, but I don't see it being Butler. I just do not think they have the horses, and I frankly don't think a team that's been 27-4 the whole year, and that's really probably their worst loss was to Villanova or Baylor on that buzzer beater. I have a hard time believing that St. John's is going to drop their opener. I think Xavier Marquette is the game that's not necessarily upset. Marquette's only favored by 2.5, 1.5, depending on your book. I heavily favor Xavier just because of the trend. They're red hot, and they pretty much need to win that game a lot more than Marquette. Creighton, I just do not see them laying an egg either. Going to Friday, though, Sean, I have a hard time seeing how it can't be Creighton versus UConn, to be quite honest. I feel like that's just chalk at everyone's bracket.
Yeah, that's certainly the most likely situation to happen. Both of those teams have been like very average for their expectations this year. That's why you see them in the middle of the bracket. UConn is the 8, Creighton is the 9. Creighton's very much a play defense and make some threes type of team. That typically is a good formula in March. UConn has been playing well. They've been playing really poorly at times this year. I think just a couple solid performances will have them feeling good going into the tournament. And then back to that Marquette Xavier game for a second, Joe. They did split the regular season series with the road team winning both games. Way back in December, Marquette won by 2 at the
on a controversial call too, by the way,
at the Cintas Center, a game that Xavier very much could have won. And then in January, they played up at the Pfizer Forum 59-57. So a combined 4 points separating these two teams. And that was when Marquette was playing better and Xavier was playing worse. So I agree. I think Xavier's probably should be the favorite based on that. And then in terms of Creighton UConn, if we do get a round 3 there, we've seen a couple of odd results in this series over the years. We had UConn winning at Creighton on February 11th, and then Creighton winning at UConn on January 18th. So that game is also split by the road teams. And that could potentially be a tiebreaker as Creighton and UConn are slated to be pretty close in the final seed line. Now, I don't really know if it matters if you're wearing your home jersey or away jersey in that 8-9 game, but potentially you could get a better region or an original location. I know UConn is eyeing that Providence, Rhode Island first-round game. So is St. John's, for that matter, actually. And then if St. John's can get the East, that would be big with it being in Newark. And UConn, we actually have both in the East region right now. That is something to look out for. Creighton in the South, and then Marquette in the Midwest, which would be I believe there is a Wisconsin round of 64, round of 32 site too. So that could be important for them. So that is something to look out for too. But Joe, anything to add there? And then I got one final thing before we wrap this up.
I think UConn's bench is going to be the key factor in this tournament. I picked them to win, just to be very transparent with everyone. Terrace Reed, Big East Sixth Man of the Year. I think that's something UConn's had over the years, and that's something that's not been spotlighted as much just because UConn's not been the dominant team they were the last 2 seasons. One thing I'll say, though, is there's plenty of guys on their bench who have potential to really throw a wrench in this thing, whether it's a Jalen Stewart, whether it's a Mahady. And, obviously you have 2 guys in their starting lineup who can go for 20 a night, and that's Liam McNeely and Alex Caravan. So with that said, Sean, I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, so the last thing I do want to talk about is this race for the final 2 seed, which does include St. John's. I think right now it's between 3 teams. That would be St. John's, Texas Tech, and Kentucky. And we'll pull up their numbers here for the viewers. And it is very close. I think I have Texas Tech ahead right now. You've essentially got to draw across the resume metrics with them very close. But Texas Tech just has the predictives that are significantly above both St. John's and Kentucky. Now, St. John's hasn't played as many games in the top tier. They're still winning them at a good rate. 2-1 in Quad 1A, 5-4 in Quad 1, 9-0 in Quad 2. That's 14-4 in the top 2 quads. That's really good. Texas Tech 12-7 and Kentucky 11-10. But Kentucky has 7 Quad 1A wins. Texas Tech 4. But Joe, I could see really any of these 3 teams being given this 2 seed in the West region. But for St. John's' sake, I think it might be better if they don't get it, because that means they can be put in the East, which is much, much closer. They can get Rhode Island as the first and second round games, and I don't think there's a whole lot of difference between the 14 and 15 seeds. So that's my thoughts on the final 2 seed.
I do agree, although I don't think that's going to really do much to temper St. John's' effort. I think this is a team that's...
They want to win this.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, and especially in their own house. And I don't think St. John's has won a Big East tournament in a really long time, I think. What's the last time? I'm looking it up.
It's before we were born.
Yeah, definitely. It might have been the Reagan presidency.
I think it was 80. I think it was the 80s.
As I'm Googling that, Sean.
I believe it was Chris Mullins' team in the 80s.
Big East tournament. Yeah, see, Google can't even find it. That's how I'm just typing it wrong as I'm rushing on this. Here we go.
I know their last outright title was in that time, and
Big East tournament championship, 2000 actually, Sean.
Okay, so still
before our lifetime.
Yep. If we had Mike on here, that is in his lifetime, but not ours. But they're very similarly profiled to Michigan State, like you said. It would be cool to see those two in the same region. I think a potential Sweet 16 game. They're essentially like the same team with their stats and across the board and
Two Hall of Fame
defensively.
coaches,
Two
yeah.
Hall of Fame coaches, defensively elite, offensively okay, efficiency wise, but poor shooting it. But St. John's is here. They've proven already that they're the best team in this league, but they could put a stamp on that. And then for the other teams, if they're able to win, maybe they can get themselves off the 8 line, which I think is really important in terms of it might be hard to crack the 7 line with Kansas and Gonzaga up there and a couple SEC teams that could make themselves unreachable with a win against a tournament team in their tournament. But a couple of storylines to watch out for here, Joe, especially that game Thursday afternoon at 2:30. So unless you got anything else to add, we'll wrap this one up.
No, shot. I do think UConn takes this. I think they become the number 1, 7, or 8 seed no one wants to see in the tournament as a result. And I do think they best St. John's in the final if I had to give a final prediction.
All right, I think I'm going with Eric Dixon and a legacy run. They do play Seton Hall tonight, and it seems like the profile of team that could get the job done. They do play pretty good defense. They do make some threes, so maybe they could have a heroic bid-stealing run. I think this might be the league where there might be one, and I'm going to go with Nova.
Yeah. And one last thing, Sean, you're the bracketology guy. If Villanova does win, they beat Seton Hall, they beat St. John's, let's assume they beat Creighton, and lose to the final to St. John's or one of the 4-5, does that get them in or no?
No, they're
they have to go all the way?
This was a question somewhere else, actually, and their numbers are actually, horrible. Their record is very favorable. They're high in the Ken Pom Luck ranking. But you see here, they're actually 75th across the resume metrics and 50th across the quality. 3-6 in quad 1, 4 Q2 losses, 2 Q3, and 1 Q4 loss. So, no, they need the auto bid, and I think there's a chance they might get it. So thank you, everybody, for tuning into this Big East preview, and be sure to check out our stuff on Selection Sunday to see where these Big East teams are seated. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.